Hi there and welcome to the Planet Zoo Every Animal Franchise Zoo. Back again, still slogging away in this zoo. Last episode we got started on the Eurasia pack animals, added the Hermann's tortoise exhibit, and I also added a large habitat that houses the mute swan, wisent and the wild boar. All species doing well and have settled in great. This episode I'll be adding in more Eurasia animals, but before we get started with that, it's time to address the big problem with this zoo. I've put this off as long as possible, but have come to my breaking point on this issue. The sheer complexity of the zoo, the hundreds of habitats and the volume of animals. We're at a point where the performance demands on the game to carry out the volume of tasks I'm asking it to do, it's not coping very well at all with that. Good news is I do have a plan, but before I explain, I do want to just show you what I'm dealing with. So let's see, yep, this is a busy section of the zoo and this will give you an idea of what's going on. Let's unpause and take a look. Yeah, so this is what I'm dealing with. It's like stop motion. The guests are walking through treacle and don't even get me started about moving the camera. Not good at all. When I started this zoo, I set out with the intention to test the limits of what the game is capable of, and essentially this is it. Adding every single animal into franchise mode? I don't think it's possible. Don't get me wrong, we did get close, and if this was a sandbox zoo with all the management settings turned off, then for sure I think that's totally feasible under those conditions. But a live franchise zoo? You can get about 90% of the way there, then it all comes crashing down. My original objective to see if it's possible to add every single animal into a franchise zoo, unfortunately, I don't think it is. We have the answer right here. It's just unplayable when it's unpaused. Now, you might be thinking, and you'd be right in arguing, that this is a very highly detailed zoo as well, on top of all the demands of adding every species. But I don't think that is the major problem. I've built up thousands of hours of play in Planet Zoo, and there's 4 things I've found that brings a game to its knees. First is the number of animals in total. There's a hefty amount of animals in this zoo, but I've played other zoos with this number of animals or similar and not had the same lag problems to this extent. So I can't completely blame this on just the animals. Next is the number of staff, and yes, this is a problem in this zoo. To keep every animal zoo running, there's a lot of employees, and that's a lot of actions and tasks the game has to process. If I was to reduce staff, then animal welfare would tank, and I can't bring myself to mistreat the animals we have in here. The third thing I've found that grinds your game to stop motion hell is the number of guests. We've topped out at around 7,300 guests in this zoo, and that's altogether too many. I could, and I have in the past, limited the number of guests in the zoo previously, but then costs of running the zoo outweigh the money coming in. We were losing money at such a staggering rate, I could foresee bankruptcy closing in quickly. The fourth thing I found that contributes massively to lag, and is the thing I think fixing will save this zoo, is the number of barriers and total habitats. We've got well over 100 habitats in the zoo currently, and something I noticed when developing another zoo was that it doesn't matter how few staff or animals or guests you have, just placing an excessive number of habitats in general, the game doesn't like that. Which brings me to the solution I'm proposing to try in this zoo. In terms of an every animal franchise zoo, I hold my hand up, we failed on that objective, it's not possible. For a while, I've already implemented the mitigation I mentioned previously, whereby I haven't been replacing animals that die off from old age, so I have had some habitats laying dormant for a while. Even that's not been enough to resolve the lag problems though. Next step is to completely remove habitats out of the zoo. What I mean by that is I won't be deleting any of the scenery, but I will be removing the barriers. I can demonstrate what I mean by this on the aardvark and meerkat habitat. This habitat's been empty for a while, the animals died quite a while ago now, and to save processing up to now, I just didn't replace them with new animals. It's time to take this one step further, and I'm going to remove the barrier entirely, so the game doesn't recognise this as a habitat any longer, it's just scenery pieces. Of course, once the zoo's finished and ready for release to the Steam Workshop, any habitat that I've removed in this way, I'll be adding the barriers back again. And to make sure I know what species goes in what habitat, I'm adding a sign close to the barrier gate that tells me what belongs in there. I don't enjoy having to do things in this way, but basically this is the only option I can think of to keep the zoo running without turning it into a sandbox zoo now. To save this zoo, this is a necessary step. Going forward, as species naturally die off from old age, we won't be replacing them with new animals. The only new animals going in will be the ones that haven't been added before to finish off the zoo. Right, so that's the state of play. That's how we're going to go forward with the zoo. About time we got back to what we normally do and continue building up the zoo. So back to the Eurasia animals. Next species on my list in the Eurasia pack is the Saiga. Last episode, we were working on animals that I was able to utilise a classic European style for the architecture, but I didn't feel comfortable using that style for the Saiga, so I've got something different going on for this one. I also made a conscious choice to put the Saiga over the road from the other habitats we'd started for the Eurasia pack to avoid clashing styles right next to each other. Classic European worked very well for the Hermann's tortoise and the mute swan. The wisent and wild boar, it's not really their style, but it worked well enough to share their habitat with the swan, but that style definitely wouldn't work for the Saiga. Saiga's a critically endangered antelope native to the steppes of Central Asia. Now, if you don't know what a steppe is, don't worry, I didn't know either until I looked it up. A steppe is a vast, flat, treeless grassland typically found in temperate regions within semi-arid climates. What that means is it's a place where things don't really grow. You'll get grasses because they're not reliant on water, but being semi-arid means that it's got some vegetation, but you wouldn't be able to support stuff like big trees. I've taken that to mean that the Saigas like flattish land and they like it plain, so little to no vegetation, but with the option to add grasses if you want to. Temperature-wise, steppes are known for hot, dry summers and cold winters, meaning creating a decent habitat for the Saiga is pretty difficult in Planet Zoo. There's no distinctive features you can call upon to make it unique or interesting. The Saiga would probably love the most basic of basic habitats, no terrain modification, no plants, just a flat empty space. We don't do that in this zoo, so I have taken some artistic liberties to add a bit of character. For this, I've raised the terrain slightly in the middle of the habitat, so it's not entirely flat. I've also added some rock work, but took care to only use small rocks, so no big boulders or anything like that in this habitat. When you're faced with an empty habitat, because the animals don't like plants, rocks is the best way to go to break up the space so it doesn't look so empty. For the hard shelter, I've got two hard shelters. The one at the front that's intended as a sleeping shelter. The structure of this shelter, half of it is inside the habitat, the other half goes over a guest pathway, so guests will be able to walk through there and we'll get a good view of the Saigas sleeping in there on the other side. The size of this structure, there's not enough to cover the animals' hard shelter needs though, so at the back of the habitat I've added a good sized open shelter where I've got the feeding trough. In terms of plants, this is where the habitat I've created here could be viewed a little unrealistic because I have added a few small trees. Where possible, I always want to add a few trees here or there, particularly around the back of a habitat, otherwise it starts looking unfinished. I did make sure to reserve majority of the nature budget for this one for the grass, utilising my old favourite, the dring grass. That's the Saiga taken care of, and a change to my usual format of building a habitat and then taking a look around in real time. It's straight onto the next speed build this time for the sloth bear. An editorial choice this one. I did record a look around the Saiga habitat, then recorded the sloth bear build, but the quality from recording the game unpaused still wasn't quite up to standard, so I decided after creating the sloth bear habitat to activate Operation Shutdown before re-recording a live showcase for both habitats. And I'm really glad I made that choice. I ended up playing Planet Zoo for about 10 hours last weekend, all in this zoo, running the zoo unpaused for most of that time. That gave plenty of time for the juveniles to age up and bringing some of the original animals' life to a natural conclusion. With every habitat closure, it's like bringing the zoo back to life. It isn't merely existing anymore, it's slowly coming back to becoming a fully functioning zoo. I'm even back in profit. At the start of this episode, we were down to about 12.5 million in the bank. 10 hours of just letting the game play out, and I'm now back to around 14.5 million. The most surprising thing from letting the zoo play out this way, closing down some of the habitats, I assumed that would have a negative impact on guest numbers, but it hasn't budged. So far, I even counted it, I've closed about 54 habitats. But the thing is, even with closing down all those habitats, the guest numbers haven't changed. There's still around 7,300 guests in the zoo at any one point, even though we've lost so many habitats. That's got to tell you something. My only conclusion is the game itself must have an upper limit of the number of guests that can be in the zoo at any one point, and I'd clearly hit that limit a long time ago. Closing so many habitats down, it hasn't changed guest numbers one bit. What it has changed, the outgoing costs have dramatically reduced. My main strategy for this, I thought about the way the zoo operates. Originally, I had one vet per work zone and one spare vet that wasn't assigned to a work zone. We have 19 work zones operational in this zoo, so that meant paying for 20 vets when reality is the vets don't have a lot to do. I suppose it depends how you play the game. When I'm doing stuff unpaused in this zoo, I have the notification tab permanently open, so I can see down to the second when something happens. Crucially, when juveniles age up. Catching the babies aging up into adults quickly is essential to keep this place running smoothly, so I can send them off to the trade centre before inbreeding occurs or animal fights due to dominance. I've never had an injury from animal fights in this zoo because I'm vigilant about looking out for the changes. So the vets in this zoo have very little to do. Having 20 vets on staff was far too many. So I went through every work zone and declassified all the vet clinics to operate under no work zone. I also fired majority of my vets, and now the zoo is managed efficiently by 4 vets that aren't assigned to a work zone. Another big cost improvement, I got rid of about half of the vendors in the zoo. In the early days, I was so paranoid about the negative influence that guest hunger and thirst could have on a zoo. I really wanted the heat map for that to be almost green. As time has gone on, I've realised it doesn't really matter all that much if the guests are complaining about hunger or not. It doesn't have that much of an impact on profit, at least. I suppose if you were playing on a hard difficulty or you were really gunning to get a 5-star zoo, then maybe getting the food and water to 100% is necessary, but for the purpose of this zoo, that's not something I need to worry about so much. Still, really surprised all these changes has turned the fate of the zoo around and it's back in profit. From my experience making an every animal zoo, I'd say the sweet spot for peak guest numbers and a happy and healthy balance sheet is around 30 habitats per zoo. Any more than that and it adds no extra value. It's just costly to run, animal welfare reduces, and the cost of feeding that many animals is just ridiculous. If you ask me, having been through it, it's not worth it other than the visual impact it has to see that many habitats together. Guests can only see an assigned number of habitats before they run out of money or are too tired to see the rest. Maybe one day I'll follow a group of visitors around from when they first enter the zoo and see how many habitats they visit before they leave. My guess is it's going to be no more than about 15. I am proud of what I've achieved with the Every Animal Zoo. It's pretty to look at, but it's an absolute nightmare to manage. It's been an adventure for sure, but I'm eager to see this finished once and for all so I never have to micromanage hundreds of species at the same time again. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough. Let's take a look what it actually looks like now and how it's working now that I've got rid of all those excessive habitats. Welcome to the new and improved live showcase. Guests are walking more normally. That's got to be a good sign. Anyway, this episode, just 2 habitats today. We've got Saiga and the sloth bear. So, Saiga, odd looking animal, isn't it? That big nose. Apparently it's to filter out dust. Apparently in the summer where they live, they get a lot of dust there, so the nose is that big to make sure it doesn't go into their lungs. 3 Saigas needed to meet the animal requirements, so 1 male and 2 females. Think I'm missing a female here. Must be stuck in the trade centre or something. I am having problems where I will send animals from the trade centre to a habitat and they will get stuck and boxed up outside of the trade centre for some reason. I'll have to check where the other one is. Anyway, Saigas get this sleeping hard shelter right next to the pathway and that leads through, so it's a connected building where visitors can get up and close to the Saigas from this side. Sides of the habitat, just a general planting area. It's a harsh corner. I tried smoothing it out, but the usual pathing trick wasn't working, so now it's just plants. Anyway, that's the Saiga habitat. Shall we move on and take a look at the sloth bear? Sloth bear's a tropical animal, gone with the rustic stone I've used before for tropical builds. And, I was just about to say, you might not want to keep the animal feces right next to the food there. Glad they cleaned that up. Hard shelter for the sloth bear. I am struggling at the moment to get out of the starter habitat mindset. Built about 50 of those recently, and now that I've got no restrictions on the pieces I can use, trying to get back into the swing of things with that and enjoy the variety of pieces I can use now. Oh, and what have we got here? Oh, that's nice. So because I've let the game run on, we're actually getting to see a rare baby that's been born that I can showcase for reviewing a new habitat. Normally, there's not enough time for babies to be born, but here we go. We've got some babies in this one. In terms of the outdoor section, I could have added a lot more plants in here. They're quite tolerable of plants, but still very conscious of every time you add a plant, then that makes it a non-navigable area. And I wanted to make sure that the bears spent a lot of the time down at the front here so the guests get a good view. Looks like we've got 2 babies here, so dad bear there and another baby bear. Interesting with the sloth bears, they do have a climbing need, but this little platform here, that's all you need to fulfill that. Oh yes, something else to note in here, at the back of the habitat I've left this quite empty to help fulfill their room requirements, so not a lot of plants back here to give them full room of movement. Kept that right to the back though, so it doesn't look too weird up front. So that's another habitat complete. I wanted to get further for this episode, but implementing Operation Shutdown across the rest of the zoo took up so much time. Just the Saiga and sloth bear is all I've had time to fit in. With all that malarkey well in order now, join me next time when I'll finally get to the takin and the wolverine enclosures. As ever, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.